Ruth, and let's switch focus now and, of course, delve into the conversation of the day, like we said, on this International Day of Forests. And the question that we're asking you is, will Kenya achieve 10% forest cover by the end of 2022? Once again, will Kenya achieve the 10% forest cover by the end of 2022? Keep tweeting at NTV Kenya, at Lubembe_Winnie. Of course, remember to use the hashtag #YourWorld. But if you want to call in and chime into the conversation of the day or ask a question, again, feel free to do so. The numbers will be down on your screen in just a moment. And let's just get to understand about forests. Why are they important? And will Kenya achieve 10% forest cover by the end of 2022? So, of course, to help us with the conversation, I will begin from my farthest, where we have Professor Frederick Owino, who is a forestry professional and patron, Kenya Forest Society. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us this morning. We also have Elizabeth Gitari Mitaru, who is an environmental lawyer from Ogo Law Advocates and chairperson, East African Wildlife Society. Thank you very much as well for coming by this morning. And we also have James Okumu, who's a programs and advocacy manager and representative of Kenya Forest Working Group Secretariat. Asante sana for coming by this morning. I trust that you're well, all of you, and doing fine. I'll begin with you, Professor. Let's just get to understand about forests, because this is something that I think we learned in schools. Some of us assume that maybe we know about it, but maybe we don't really know much about forests. Let's just start from there and establish ground as far as forests, the different types of forests, and why are they really, really important?
Thank you, Winnie. Let me start by thanking you and the Nation Media Group for giving this chance for people to discuss progress in forests, management, and conservation. We celebrate the 21st of March every year in various sessions, mostly tree planting sessions, but we don't have a chance to explain to the general population the importance of forests. And I'm glad in your startup you have broadened the scope of this discussion to let us consider things like the effect of Ukraine war on forests in Africa, because these things are interrelated.
Yeah.
Now, the International Day of Forests was proclaimed in 2012, largely to bring together countries and within-country actors to understand the status of forests in the countries and the progress being made to manage and to conserve those resources.
Okay.
Forests were known in the past for the production capacity, for production capacities. Many people think that forests are there to produce wood, and many people know that trees produce charcoal and other minor forest products. Yeah. So it is the production bit that was emphasized in the past. But more recently, we have realized that forests are even more important for regulation of water that flows in our rivers, regulation of the oxygen that we generate, regulation of sequestration of carbon. In fact, a recent study by UNEP found out that up to 84% of the forests are important for the regulation potentials rather than the production. And if we lose the forests, we incur such big losses downstream than what we can get from planting trees.
Okay.
So I think this gives us an opportunity to look at a holistic picture. Let me start by your mention of the 10% forest cover targets. Now, when that was set in the Constitution in 2010, the forest cover was about 4%. I personally did not like the idea of writing into any constitution of a country that you must have 10%.
Okay.
Usually it is not the practice. India has got that 10% in their constitution, but most countries would have that in their policies. You have in your forest policies that we will achieve this. Putting it in the constitution brings a lot of problems, which we already have.
Okay.
The presidency is now forced to address this 10%.
Okay.
And subsequent presidencies will have to address the 10%.
The same. Yes, and of course we'll also get to understand the impact of the same and exactly why 10%, you know?
Yes.
Why not 15%? Probably someone is asking, why not like 20% of forest cover? Because based on what you said, of course forests are very, very important.
Yes.
And not only for, you know, production purposes, but also for regulation purposes.
Yes.
And of course the fact that 1 out of 3 outbreaks,
yes,
you know, and of course like of emerging diseases, for example, like HIV and SARS, you know? So it's interesting to see the shift from just production, like he said earlier on, to even like diseases and the impact that forests, you know, have. So of course we'll get to understand more about the same. But for now, let's speak to James. You know, in school, we learned about indigenous forests and man-made forests and all those things. And probably someone is just watching and thinking, okay, what is the difference? And do we have one that is more important as compared to the others? Because we also sometimes see how some indigenous forests are much, much more protected. And there's a lot of calls for protection of the same as compared to these other types of forests.
Thank you, Winnie. Let me start by thanking you for having us here. Just to respond to your question, all forests are important. I think I want to start by underscoring that. All forests are important. But the reason why we are laying more emphasis on the natural forest is because within the natural forest we do have different species or different varieties of trees which serve different purposes. And therefore, in terms of cumulative benefits, you'll realize that the indigenous forest or the natural forest will have much more benefits. Now, indigenous forests or natural forests are those forests that grow on their own. And like I said, they have a variety of tree species. If you come to the man-made forest or plantations, number one of the characteristics that you realize that probably it's one species or just a few. There's some sort of uniformity in the manner in which they are planted. Yeah, so I think in a nutshell, in terms of the difference between natural forest and also man-made forest, that would be my take on that.
I mean, can't we have a place or a point where we have, yes, man-made forests, but different species of trees? And I know there's usually a call for planting trees almost every single year when we celebrate International Day of Forests. But then again, the question is then, what do we plant? What specific types of trees do we plant to make sure that then we contribute, you know, to a larger scale in terms of protecting our forests? But very quickly answering that question of then, can't we have a form or a basis where we can just have, yes, man-made forests, but plant different types of trees?
Well, if you look at man-made forests, generally people do it for commercial purposes. And so majority of people resort to tree species that grow faster. Yeah, because if you look at most of indigenous tree species, they take long for them to mature.
True.
And so if you look at it commercially, it will not be viable. But of course, if you look at the value of indigenous trees in the long term, they have more value than some of these exotic species that we are talking about.
All right.
Yeah, so I think that's really the motivation when you talk about indigenous trees and also the plantation.
The plantation.
Yeah.
Okay, I see that. It's not sustainable as compared to the indigenous forests. That's what you say.
Exactly. People are looking at it from business angle generally.
Okay. Not really to protect the forest.
Because you remember we have industries that needs to be supported by
True.
some of these products.
Yeah.
And so we really need to make sure that we're able to produce enough within a short period of time to supply to these industries.
Okay.
So plantation forests are equally important.
Yeah.
And without them, then our indigenous forest will be in great threat. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. And then for you, Elizabeth, let's just then come back to this day, right? International Day of Forest. And of course, the theme is Forest for Sustainable Production and Consumption. Can we just understand how really important is this day?
Thank you, Winnie, for that question. I think one of the things that we all know as a species, but we know it in the depths of our bones.
Yeah.
but understanding it fully in terms of an intellectual understanding of it becomes a little bit problematic. Number one, if you look at how the world systems work in terms of survival of species and survival of humankind, we all depend on natural resources for our livelihoods, for our lives, essentially. And to go back to what Prof was saying at the beginning, that we, as a species, we started depending on forests the day we were created or formed, depending on which theory you subscribe to. And because we do depend on natural resources, and more specifically now in this particular instance on forests, we do realize that and even before we get to the 21st century, to the 20th century, you know, we were collecting wood, we were hunting in the forests, we were getting berries and gathering, you know, in the forest, we were getting water from the forest and so on and so forth. Now, the world's population has more than quadrupled since those times, then, right? We are now roughly about, we're now about 8 billion, if I'm not wrong. 8 billion people all depending on this one resource that cannot be expanded at the same rate that we can expand, right? If all the women on planet Earth of viable reproductive health could decide to reproduce, within 9 months, the population has,
of course, doubled.
Exactly. But when you look at forests, if we all decide to plant a tree today, within 9 months, it will not even be the size of, most trees will not, you know, be this high, right? So it's important to look at this conversation from the perspective of we are depending on forest resources. We are depending on ecosystem services that forests provide, and we therefore need to figure out a way very quickly on how to sustainably manage this resource and sustainably utilize it as well. And when we talk about sustainability, we're talking about the capacity to use the resource for our own benefit, while at the same time protecting the opportunity and the access of future generations to also benefit from the same resource.
All right. And of course, you see, once we talk about this, majority of the people will be like, see, there's a specific entity or a specific body that deals with that. We'll just plant, maybe not, one tree and that's it, right? But of course, this, like we always hear the message, it needs to be a constant thing. It needs to be done almost every year, every month, if that is possible. Like plant one, you know that idea, plant one, I mean cut one, plant two. Is that sustainable? We'll also look at that in just a moment. But then again, Professor, can we just then get to understand the direct link? Again, going back to school, which is like a lot of years ago, as far as then forests and of course source of water, and then the rivers of course flow into lakes, and you know, lakes into oceans, is like, you know, a ripple effect. But then again, like you said earlier on, now we're seeing it more coming from just production, right, into more of, you know, things that affect us, you know, on a daily, and especially when it comes to like diseases as well, right? So let's just make that direct link to make it very easy for people to understand that forest is not just about water, right? But, you know, boils down or trickles down to a lot of things that affect us as people on a daily basis.
Yeah, thank you, Winnie. Let us start by stressing that different countries have different endowments of forest resources. Kenya is a forest-poor country. We are not as poor as the countries in the north, but we are forest poor as compared to Gabon and the countries in the Congo Basin. That is something that we have to understand as we come up with strategies to make sure that the production, the productivity of forests are sustained. Because Kenya is a forest poor country, it was decided even at the time of independence that we will pursue compensatory plantation program. This entails conserving the natural forests, which are very important for regulatory purposes, having only a small part of them to grow fast-growing plantation species
All right.
to compensate.
Yes. So
Because
that
we
don't
knew
dig
that the
into-
population was going to grow,
Yeah.
industries would grow, and so on.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Winnie, we have messed up our games here. For 3 decades now, the plantation program has collapsed. With the plantation program collapsing, people go into the little indigenous forests
That is still
to
there.
extract whatever they can. So it is the collapse of the plantation program, the agroforestry program. In fact, if you look at the strategies over time, we in the profession, we have tried to be ahead of the game and say, okay, let's move on to trees for energy production, trees in farm systems. And we have made good moves, but with the plantation program collapsing, people are now forced to go and poach in the indigenous forests.
Right.
So if you look at the situation on the ground, we are losing something like 50,000 hectares a year in terms of deforestation. Mostly uncontrolled, because a lot of this is in assaults. Nobody knows who is cutting this tree for charcoal making.
Yeah.
And so we now have, and again, we have suffered from excisions of the little indigenous forest we have. We are now in cases, we have cases where whole forests have been destroyed, biodiversity has been destroyed, and whole regulatory system, rivers have
been
stopped
destroyed.
flowing.
Yeah.
So these are the kinds of problems we have had. It has not been a problem of strategies, but implementing our strategies.
Okay. And of course, we know as a country, implementation is where we usually have like the biggest problem.
Yes.
That clearly something needs to be done. But Professor, when you say regulatory, right? Just to make someone watching us at home understand the aspect of regulatory when it
Okay.
comes to forests, what exactly do you mean?
Yes, if people who are, for example, in the Molo area, we had a block of forest, Molo forest block. It has been completely destroyed. The rivers that were flowing from there into Nakuru, Lake Nakuru, ceased.
Yes.
The block of forest in eastern Mau, close to the Molo forest, 50% of it is gone through excisions,
Yeah.
conversion to agriculture, and waters that flowed from there to Lake Nakuru dried. As you are aware, Winnie, we have tried to address the Mau forests very
For a very
seriously,
long time, yes.
and now some of the rivers are recovering. So we don't need to refer to big science on forest hydrology. We have seen the evidence.
Yes.
If you destroy this, the river dries.
This is what
if you replace
happens
it,
next.
the river
Yes.
comes back.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And of course, James, can we also look at other aspects that, maybe that we have done individually contributed towards, again, maybe deforestation or some forests actually just disappearing, right? And that ripple effect that it has on a person.
Yeah, Winnie, maybe before I can answer that question, there was a question that you raised earlier when you asked why 10% forest cover.
Yeah.
I just want to start by mentioning that by the international standards, a country that has a forest cover that is less than 10% is considered to be environmentally unstable.
All right.
So it's like the bare minimum, yeah? So that's why I think we had set that threshold that at least we need to maintain 10%.
10% from
Yeah.
6.9.
And then you
Yeah.
also asked about the connection between forests and now our rivers, which Prof has tried to answer. And let us understand the sources of our waters. You've heard of water towers, and some people can call them sponge. What happens is that when it rains, then the forests are able to trap this water and release it steadily, slow but steadily. And that makes sure that our rivers continue to flow for a long time.
All right.
Now, we have seen in the cases where our forests have been destroyed, whenever it rains, you see a lot of floods. Why? because the catchment that is supposed to hold this water and release it slowly has been destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And so all this water flows downstream. Now the result of that is that the riverbanks will burst, and so it starts seeing issues of flooding.
Okay.
So we're just trying to break that down so for people to see why we're saying
It
forests
is
are
important.
source of these rivers. Now back to the question that you said earlier. Just as much as all of us have, the right to clean and healthy environment, so do we have a responsibility when it comes to protecting and conserving this particular
forest,
resource.
yeah.
And I normally give a very simple example of the issues of waste. When we get off our homes, you see people throwing litter around. Does it mean they don't know?
They know.
They do know, and
Yeah.
that's why back at home they don't just throw the litter anyhow. Now the same thing comes to, the same issue applies to our forests. Well, we do understand that there are various drivers that push people into our forests, yeah? And one of them could be issues of poverty. People are trying to earn a living. And that's why what we are talking about when it comes to forest conservation is sustainability. We are cognizant of the fact that people depend on forests for their survival. Yeah. But how do we make it sustainable? Number one, it must be controlled. Number two, you as an individual, as you extract, and so you must also replenish. Yeah? So what you do to nature by just cutting one tree does not only affect you as an individual. And that's one funny thing about nature, that what you do to nature will not only affect you. Well, you benefit from it, but the impact will be felt by everybody. And that's why we talk about collective responsibility.
Yeah.
Because I know what you do as Winnie will affect me as an individual.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so the small steps that we take, the little things that we do back at home in terms of cutting trees, actually change our whole environment. Yeah, so everyone has a responsibility in terms of making sure that as they depend on forests for their products, so they should also make sure that they protect what we have and also be able to replenish.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think there's that competition of we need to survive because, like you rightly put, we depend on forests. A lot of people actually depend on forests, almost all of us, right? But then again, there's also that question of fine. So, for example, if I have like a timber yard, right? And of course, we've seen a lot of cases of encroachment into forests. There's people who go there, either burn charcoal or get timber. So it's like I need to survive, but also I need to protect the same forest. So then, where is the balance, Elizabeth?
I think the balance, Winnie, you find it when one starts connecting the dots to what is happening. So we have quite a large population of Kenyans living in urban areas. So for instance, let's take the example of people living in Nairobi. Yeah. When we talk about forests, perhaps a person who's been born and brought up in Nairobi does not actually conceptualize the stuff we're talking about, depending on forests, getting water from forests, because for them, they live in a flat on third floor. Yes. They get their water from the tap. They buy their mangoes from the supermarket or from Mama Mboga down the street. Like they don't have that direct connection. But when you think about deforestation and the fact that when rivers dry up, like Prof is saying, when forests are unable to sequester the water, then it means that the water we get from city council, right? Well, it's county government now. Yes. The county government dries up and you start getting water rationing. So what happens? Your landlord tells you, if you add just 500 shillings on top, we will get you a borehole, right? Okay. We'll get you a borehole. Right. So you find that everybody around you has dug boreholes to extract water, all right? And once you start relating back some of these things to personal experiences, then you do find that in as much as the first act or activity of a tree being cut down, of a forest hectares being excised, actually does translate to your quality of life. And I do want to come back, Winnie, if you allow me, to something that Jabez has said around 10% forest cover. And Prof also mentioned the idea, the concept of a forest poor country. Now, I think the question that Kenyans need to ask is, when we say forest cover, 10% forest cover, how are we defining forest?
Yes.
Are we counting the grass? Are we counting the one tree that is in my backyard to account for the forest
At
cover
least I
of
have
my
some
neighbor?
greenery.
Right?
I have something green.
Right? And that definition of forest is incredibly critical, because if we count from the very from 2 inches or 3 inches of grass to say that all the way up to whatever height constitutes a forest, then we can actually sit back and relax and say we have 20% tree cover.
Yeah, me, I
but
have
we
like
actually
3
don't.
of them in my backyard.
Exactly.
Okay, so before you
Exactly.
then help us understand more about then the forest and even the 10%, right? How are they then distributed to make sure that then again we do not have other places in the country where it's like too green, the rainfall is really good, and others is like completely dry, right? But let's pick a call. We have Wesley from Bomet. Good morning.
Morning to you, madam.
Thank you very much for calling us this morning, Wesley. Do you have a question, a comment?
I have a comment, madam.
All right, go ahead.
First of all, let me thank the team for introducing this topic today.
All right.
Okay, my question is, here in Bomet, Konoin sub-county, we have been having indigenous trees. We have a group that we have been planting indigenous trees all along. Now, when you go around try to sell these trees, we lack the people who normally buy.
All right.
So it's my request now, if there is they can support us, we apply these trees.
Okay.
All
right. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Wesley. Appreciate your question. Of course, Wesley actually just brings in the question that I, of course, was about to ask. As far as then, fine, we have this call every single year. Make sure that you plant a tree. Cut 1, plant 2, right? Which is good. But then again, what exactly are we planting? Because Wesley says we have tried to plant these indigenous trees, but then again, there's no one to buy them, right? Professor, what would you say to
Yeah,
Wesley?
it's a good question from Wesley, and it leads to a good discussion here. I have had the opportunity to serve in a presidential commission for soil conservation and afforestation in the past. And we covered the whole country with the President Gabion's tree planting. After some time, we took stock of what we did. We realized that for public plantings, where there was a lot of TV cover, all the big shots there, under 10% of the trees planted survived.
Okay.
And sometimes it was as low as 2%. So we have learned some lessons here, that it is not the planting of the tree, but taking care of this tree
yes.
to a minimum. If it is the exotic ones, it is a matter of 2 years. They should get on.
Right.
If the indigenous ones take longer. But there is a responsibility to care for the trees planted. So we should not be taking stock of
how many trees
we have planted,
Yeah.
but how many species we have cared for. Related to this point, I want to say that given the experiences we have had in Kenya, I see that we can gain more traction if those who want to support afforestation efforts, forest conservation efforts, work with specific groups like the one Wesley is mentioning. People who are committed to ensure that the trees planted will survive, rather than call them to barazas on such a day and they plant and then they leave it to goats. I think it is a very important experience we have had, and we should be addressing this, including the private sector, NGOs, private sector. Let them tag up with the communities that are committed to making sure that the planted trees grow into seedlings, grow into trees.
Yeah, someone was actually saying we're moving from just planting trees to growing trees,
Yes.
which again, of course, encompasses what you're saying, caring for these trees.
Yes.
Also, something else that I picked from Wesley is fine. So we're planting these indigenous trees, right? But then again, so who do we sell them to? Because there are not people to buy them.
I think, Winnie, that when we have the conversation around indigenous tree species and nature for that matter, really, we need to understand that the resources we use today, the trees that are beneficial to us today, we did not plant them.
Sure.
We found them
We
here.
found them, yes.
So the idea that we are growing trees to benefit us, and especially indigenous trees that take a long time, like Prof is talking about, the idea that they will benefit us directly is probably ambitious, if I can use that word, right?
Okay, yeah, because they take time.
Absolutely, they take time, and we've started by saying that we are approaching forest and tree conservation from a sustainability perspective.
Right.
What we are doing today is not to benefit us directly. It will benefit us indirectly through benefiting our children, but even most probably our grandchildren. All right. Sure. So unless we're talking about private or community plantations, like Jabez was talking about, the trees and indigenous forest covered indigenous trees, I think those we should really look at it from a sustainability perspective.
More long term.
Yes, exactly, from a long term perspective.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then again, is okay. Go ahead.
Maybe if I can also weigh in from what Wellesley mentioned. When he said they've been planting the indigenous trees and they don't know where to sell it, I was a bit lost because if it is indigenous trees, that is not the expectation. So my understanding of his question probably is that they probably have a tree nursery, and so they will want to sell these seedlings.
Yes.
And I think one of the challenges that most of these community groups have is that number one is the issue of the species that they raise in their tree nurseries. Are they suitable for the area in which they are? Because when we are going to do tree planting, number one, we do try to discourage the issue of importing seedlings. And so people will want to buy seedlings from that particular locality. So if they are unable to raise the right species for that area, you've heard of issues of species site matching. So knowing which species of tree will do well where.
Yes.
So I think that to me is very critical. That's why in many cases they have these tree seedlings, but then they end up growing in their nurseries because they are not right for that particular place. So people would rather import than take those seedlings. The other issue is the issue of quality. And so I think the county government and even Kenya Forest Service and of course other stakeholders have a critical role to play in terms of, sensitizing the groups to be able to really understand in this area which kind of species will do well so that they're able to access market. So I think that would be my take.
Okay. And of course, can we also have like an aspect of alternatives, like awareness, as far as then fine, if this is not doing well in terms of market, because again, these people need to survive, right? Depend on the seedlings to make ends meet, then do we have alternatives for them, and if so, which ones, all right? But can we answer that after a break, because of course we need to pay bills. So let's take a short break, but of course when we come back, of course it's still on International Day of Forests, and of course we also want to understand how important forests are to you and to me. And the question that we're asking you today is, will Kenya achieve the 10% forest cover by the end of 2022? And what are you doing to contribute towards us achieving the 10%? All right, we also want to understand that. But of course, that discussion is coming up after the short break. Stay with us. This is Your World.
Toss White hutoa madoa kutoka nguo za rangi kama red, yellow, blue, yani kala zote. Lakini ni specialist wa kutoa madoa kutoka nguo za white. There's the Toss for every laundry need. Toss ya tosha.
TB ina tiba. Pata matibabu bila malipo katika hospitali zote za umma. Tujijali, tumalize TB. Ujumbe huu umeletwa kwako na Wizara ya Afya na washirika wake.
If you count the number of charges that have been leveled against followers of the UDA party, it is corruption.
How does it feel from your side of the coalition to be termed as the coalition of the corrupt?
It doesn't bother us because we know who the real thieves are.
Who are the real thieves?
It's Azimio.
If they have a duty to uphold that constitution, they have a duty to ensure that corruption does not become a culture in this country.
Constitutionally, there is no politician that is charged with the mandate of fighting corruption.
The institutions Aaron talks about are morticians. They come at the tail end.
The reason why we cannot win the war of corruption in Kenya is because we have cases that are politically instigated which cannot be sustained in a court of law.
When we are doing our roads, when we are doing our SGR, when we are doing our public projects, are Kenyans getting value for money?
Maziwa kamili asili ya Kenya.
Right, welcome back. Glad you're still with us. This is Your World, and of course today we're having a very important conversation that really everyone should be having, and that is on the International Day of Forests, of course usually marked on the 21st day of March every single year. And of course this year's theme, as in today's theme on the International Day of Forests, is Forest for Sustainable Production and Consumption. And of course a panel, very able panel, of course helping us understand why it is your responsibility and my responsibility to make sure that again we protect our forests, right? But right about now we have a caller on the line, Titus from Kimilili. Good morning.
Habari ya asubuhi.
Nzuri sana, habari ya kwako?
Niko tu Kimilili, tuko wazima. Nilikuwa nataka kuuliza marafiki zangu ambao wako sasa kwa TV hivi. Mimi nilipanda kama nimepanda miti. Na hiyo miti nataka nitumie. Alafu wakikata wanakuja wanakuambia watu wa forest wanakuambia pako uende ukate permit. Sasa nashindwa hii miti nimepanda kwa shamba langu. Sijaenda kwa forest. Sasa mniambie makosa inakuwa wapi? Mimi mwenye nimepanda au mwenye ambaye sijui, nataka hawa nielezee hapo ndio nisikie mzuri.
Okay. All right. Sawa sawa, asante sana Titus. Professor, do you want to take that?
Yes. Winnie, before I reply to Titus, allow me to go back to what Elizabeth has talked about, the attitude that we have to trees, the indigenous versus exotic trees. We have worked in other countries with foresters in other countries that have got rotation periods of 80 to 120. And they still manage their forests very well. Some of the forests are actually individually owned, like in Scandinavian countries. People own forests and they preserve it. The big difference we have here is the poverty level in our countries. When somebody cannot afford gas for cooking, cannot avoid simple things in life, they go to destroy the environment. They go to destroy the forests. And the government should look at it more broadly. In order to conserve our forests, we need to be looking at other things that our growing populations need.
Yeah.
How is the energy issue being tackled? How is the supplemental? People who actually grow crops within forests, how can we get them out of forests to grow the same crops or to get better money to survive? So forests are related to poverty, and in our case, you have a situation where you have to really sell a fast-growing species which somebody can utilize in his lifetime to convince him to grow trees. But the idea of I grow it for my children and grandchildren is totally out. But let me say that in many countries, forestry enterprises are on the basis of a long-term relationship. People who have got into forestry investment do it for their grandchildren, not for them.
Not for themselves.
Yes, that's
okay.
right. It's a question of attitude, really. Now I turn to Titus of Kimilili. There is a big problem about asking people to grow trees when they can't cut them, when they need to cut and sell. This is because of the logging bans that the government floats from time to time. And not only the bans, but the corrupt bureaucracies in our system where a chief needs to be tipped, for example, to allow you to cut your tree so that somebody transports it. The person transporting it is also disturbed by the police. They have to pay something. And so people end up losing the value that they have grown.
You work so hard, take care of this tree, and then you do not get the benefits from the same.
Now, many foresters have argued that forest bans are not the way to go. Government should not rule through bans because it is a disincentive for tree growing at the individual level. We should sort out the corruption that always primes the bans.
Okay. So then for Titus, it's like, Sasa, what do I do? Okay. What's other alternatives then does he have? Or we just have to wait until the government addresses this whole aspect of corruption before then some of these people who grow trees then can reap the benefits of the same?
At the moment, the government bans because it has failed in the plantation program for over 3 decades.
Okay.
They have not put money into plantations, and so people have to steal from the limited indigenous forests. We should be more proactive as government and say, let's grow fast.
Okay.
Let's provide the resource. Then people won't have to go into those.
Okay. Maurice, you want to chime into the same, Elizabeth?
Yes, I think what Prof is talking about is incredibly on point. And Titus is bringing in an issue that we need to give quite a bit of thought to it. Because here is a citizen of Kenya who has his own piece of land and he wants to benefit from that piece of land.
Sure.
And we have a government that over the decades, all right, like Prof is saying, 3 decades, 30 years, that has consistently failed with the plantation program and so on and so forth. And perhaps the immediate solution for the citizen on the ground would be to have a chat with KFS, even with the East African Wildlife Society. We have a desk that would provide this information, and we'll be able to share our contacts to be able to tell what tree species would best grow in that region or in different regions across the country where one can benefit from the tree without having to cut it down.
Okay.
Because it's not always that you derive benefit by killing a tree, right? So sometimes you will derive benefit from a tree by putting a beehive. Right?
Yeah.
And that has tremendous ecosystem benefits to the land. So I think when we talk about sustainable utilization and consumption, it's not always that we have to kill to be able to benefit. It's possible to still plant trees that you can benefit from without having to cut them down.
Okay. Yeah. I see that. Now, but then again, there's so many people who are like, fine, what if then I just want to plant this tree And I'm not too sure how long it will sustain, because like we said earlier on, we need to shift our attitudes from just planting trees and then tomorrow it has grown and then the next day I'm selling these things, you know, to pay either for my child's school fees or, you know, to fend for my family, but also find like sustainable ways. But then again, the level of awareness as far as these alternatives that you're saying, Elizabeth, which are very, very important, right? And of course, compare that to an indigenous tree, which will take a long time before it grows. Of course, a case of beehive, right? That would be very easier because again, it's more short term, and then of course you reap the benefits. The level of awareness, how many people know this? That this is possible. You can plant trees, absolutely indigenous, amazing trees, but also still have other things going on that will help you in terms of supplementing your income.
I do think that, yes, awareness is a huge issue, but also I think when professionals and scientists and environmental lawyers and the rest of them, well, the rest of us, talk about awareness and these issues, we tend to talk about them like this huge behemoth of something that is so complex that we need programs and projects and all of these things to deconstruct it so that the mwananchi can understand, which is actually not true. Because, and especially up country and in the rural areas, you just need to sit down with someone who's at least 30 or 40 years older than you are. And understand from them, right? It's possible to have conversations with elders in the village, and if you don't have, you know, elders in the village or parents or grandparents who are older than you, to be able to understand, for this tree we use it to sort out our pains and aches. For this particular tree or this particular plant we use it to sort out colds and so on and so forth. I don't think that when people talk about awareness, this information, especially in respect to forest, more than any other natural resource, is available indigenally. It's available in the home, in the village. We don't need research. And Professor, you must forgive me. I might be doing something to your profession, but we don't need research papers to tell us how to use the trees that grow in our backyard. That is knowledge that is within us. So I think it's about having that conversation and facilitating it, and not thinking that this is information we will get from out there. This is information we already have in our societies and in our families.
I'm pretty sure my mom is very, very happy watching you saying that right now, because again, she's do you have a headache? She go to the farm, get something, and it works.
And it works.
So I know she's very happy. She's like, yes. That is how it happens. You want to chime into the thing?
Let me also weigh in on this discussion. Number one, I just want to reiterate what Prof and Elizabeth has talked about. That awareness is very important, and this is a continuous process. We can never get to a point where we say our population is fully aware. So it has to be done continuously. And if you look at our Forest Act of 2016, Section 21, where we have functions that have been devolved to the counties. And one of them is extension services. And I think our communities or the farmers are suffering because we have not fully transitioned, where counties are able to take up these responsibilities. Because the farmers are waiting for them to be able to give them these services. And so if it is done at that particular level, then it will be very impactful. And of course, also civil society organizations also have a role in terms of also continuously stepping in to assist the government in terms of also creating this awareness. So I think the extension services is an issue in our country, and probably it will still take us time to really transition.
And of course, again, 8 out of 47 counties are actually a step ahead, right, in as far as then tree planting and of course championing for the efforts to ensure that the environment is protected and conserved. Then what happens to the rest of the counties? Is it that it is not urgent, it is not important? Is it a question of then priority, really, when it comes to protecting the forest and, of course, passing awareness really as far as, you know, planting trees and growing trees, not just planting and then leave them, like Professor said, to the goats, but making sure that you also ensure that the trees actually grow and thrive. But Professor, can we just go back, because we've talked about and emphasized the need for us to change our attitudes as far as tree growing, not just tree planting, right? Can we just go back to the basics and just understand, first of all, the term forests? And remember earlier on, we were talking about the 10%. So then again, when it comes to the distribution of the same, how do we distribute it to make sure that then not only one area like we saw from the video. Cabernet looks really nice and plush, it's very green, but then again, when we go up north, it's like with two different countries. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Winnie. Let me start by clarifying that the definition of forest is straightforward.
Yeah.
But we nowadays think of forest differently. We talk about forests, closed forests, and trees outside forests. Trees on farms, for example.
Okay.
For Kenya, which is a forest-poor country, a lot of our woody resources are in the woodlands. They are as important as the trees in the closed forests. And there are small streams that emanate from those small woodlots that we should protect. Now, when it comes to attitudes of people growing in trees, as Elizabeth has said, we had, in fact, in the 1920s, Njonjo's father was famous for men of trees. There were traditional dances around people planting trees. It's a culture that we should have promoted up to today, where you put some value on the trees, you keep it there, and for sure it will earn something, if not to you, but to your children and grandchildren.
Yeah.
And in this regard, I want to say that the indigenous trees, some of the indigenous trees we have, are much more valuable than the exotics that we promote for planting. The only thing that is required is that you become patient. You leave it for your children to benefit from but it will be a treasure for your children and grandchildren.
Okay.
This is the attitude that I would like to really appeal to Kenyans, particularly Kenyans who are able to invest. I know there are Kenyans who really need it as of today, but there are many Kenyans who are ready to invest in the future. In other countries like US, for example, there are schemes that are cut out for people who want to own forests, long-term loans that can be provided. So these are things that we can work on if we really are serious in promoting culture. Finally, I want to say that one area that we have really been slow on is the private sector engagement in forests, forest growing and so on. You know that our pulp and Kenya was a leader in forest industrial processing when we had the pulp and paper at Webuye. And that pulp and paper scheme was giving good value to farmers around that area who would grow trees on outgrower schemes.
Yeah.
This has collapsed. Kakuzi has tried very hard to grow trees, invest in tree growing, but it is facing problems because of market which is not controlled. They went into charcoal production in a standard way, but the other people came in with charcoal stolen from elsewhere and messed that market. So we need to reorganize our private sector engagement here to offer opportunities for people, individuals, to sell. Because when you have the industries moving, people will even have a choice to say, I can sell to you or to that one. So they are related.
Yeah. And of course, we'll talk about then what needs to be done moving forward. Because of course, we're marking this day. It's important. We're passing awareness and changing attitudes, which is very, very essential. So then again, moving forward in terms of individual, institutions, government, communities, again, what do we need to make sure that then again pull, hands together, really make sure that we protect our forests. Now, there's also an aspect of indigenous communities. And of course, we know, some of them, especially the Ogiek people, in the Mau Forest and the Sengwer, who are really, really championing and protecting, this indigenous forest. living there, but of course making sure that they also protect. But then again, there's also a case of displacement, right? So you displace these people, there are no alternatives for them. So then what happens, you know, from them? Because you displace them, send them away, then there's no one to protect this. Yes, the government said, of course, it had people from the forest come, you know, and protect this, but really it's not happening. So then again, can we just understand the important role of, you know, indigenous communities in this forest, and of course the role that they play in terms of protecting the sea?
Winnie, I think that's a very interesting angle you've just brought on. And especially when we think about how forest management law started and when the colonialist came. You know, we were all living in harmony with nature, right? And, you know, I could go off on a tangent on traditional systems and traditional ethical systems around how people used to live with nature, what you can't kill, rules around killing wildlife, cutting down trees, so on and so forth. That existed. And we also did not have we did not have any urban centers to speak of, right? And so when the colonialist came, and there was now need to translocate Western thinking, or British thinking for that matter, onto the systems that we have. And also, you know, surrounding the sort of ideological conceptions around how Africans take care of things and so on and so forth. And there was then a law that was introduced that you can only conserve nature if people and nature are separate. Right?
Yes.
And we've conducted that experiment for over 100 years now. And people are just now realizing that actually that's not really
It doesn't
true.
work.
Even with wildlife, we see it. Before it was you cannot live with wildlife. Now we're talking about co-management of wildlife with livestock herding and so on. And there's success stories across the country. So you have communities who have consistently been told that they are incapable of managing the very resource that they depend on. And the problem then comes in when you take this community out of the forest, where they were living sustainably. And in the law that you've also created, you introduce something called a logging permit. All right? A logging permit that's available to Bwana Mkubwa in Nairobi, who has Bwana Mkubwa Company Limited, and he can pay the fees for the permit and go in where you got the communities out to log, right? And I think the thing that we need to come back to and acknowledge, and it's very, you know, it's encouraging that we've actually changed our forest conservation laws, and we now have a Forest Act of 2016 that really places communities at the center of forest management and supports forest management and forest co-management between communities and with governments. And I think that really is the way to go. It is impossible to manage forests outside of community.
The communities, and of course there's also another question of development. And I'm pretty sure you know, of course, there was an uproar, especially when it comes to, you know, the construction of the expressway and, you know, going through Uhuru Park and, of course, destroying some of this, you know, resources that people have grown knowing this is Uhuru Park, this is what it looks like. And, of course, there's also that question of Nairobi National Park, right? So development, but also destroying some of these resources. Where is the disconnect, all right? But for now, let's pick a call. We have Kimani from Nairobi. Good morning. Kimani, are you there?
Yes, good morning. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. How are you doing this morning?
I'm very well, thank you.
Okay, do you have a question or do you want to chime into the conversation?
I have a question, yes.
All right, go ahead.
It's a follow-up on the debate that came from Wesley's question about the forest. Prof mentioned that the survival rates of the forest, of the trees planted in the forest, has actually been very low. But there are methods that have been proven that will probably require benefits from that kind of labor. A method like the Miyawaki method that has been used at the University of Nairobi, or rather demonstrated at the University of Nairobi and Karura Forest, that the forests are actually, they're able to replant the trees and they grow really, really fast. And also there is a higher success rate in that kind of plantation. So my question is, why haven't we embraced that, and especially as KFS? Why can't we embrace that and benefit from the desire of the people to be seen planting trees across the country here?
Okay, thank you very much, Kimani. Professor, you will answer that. But before you answer that, we also have another caller on the line, Nelson from Kapsabet. Good morning. Nelson, are you there?
Hello?
All right, hi, how are you?
Mimi ni Nelson, eh?
Aha. Okay.
Mkidia wataalamu.
Una swali?
Kuna mimi natutanga miti kweli. Lakini hainunuliwi. Hata kuna wakati nilikuwa na miti 40,000 ya kienyeji. Indigenous trees. Lakini hapana nunuliwa. Mpaka serenda sasa mimi natutanga miti 10,000, 20,000.
Okay. Swali lako ni gani? Unataka kuuliza swali gani kule utauza, ama swali lako ni lipi?
Swali langu tuna nini kwa maboroti inaangusanga miti lakini hapana panda. Kwa maana unaona boroti kuna brokers anakujanga hata kama huko miti kuna brokers naenda angusa miti huko na hapana panda miti na kwa makaundi iko brokers na kujanga nunua miti na hakuna group. Nasemanga tumetumwa tununue miti kupanda lakini hakuna nini, hakuna ya hapana iko na group ajui vile natutwa miti na kuja nunua tu. Lakini naambianga watu tununue kwa shilingi 5, shilingi 7 na umefanyia kazi kubwa miti. Kuchunga miti mpaka inakuwa futi 2, futi 3. Hata saa hii mimi natoka kunyunyiza saa hii miti.
Asante sana Nelson kwa swali lako. Na utajibiwa, all right? So of course, you can take. And of course, he's brought up, I think, 2 different points in terms of no one is buying, but then again, some are buying, but kuna cartels, and within. So I think Jarvis and Elizabeth, you will answer, either of the question. But Professor, the first question, that Kimani asked, as far as then, why haven't we embraced, the plantation problem?
Yeah, it's a good question Kimani has raised. Karura Forest, the management of Karura Forest is unique at the moment, and it is a model that we could borrow from for other forests. I can't talk for Kenya Forest Service because I know that they have provisions for forest local forest associations to work with them in other ventures. What I know is that for Karura Forest, there are other enablers in this, which makes it possible. They are the donor community, the representatives that the late Professor Wangari worked with closely, who have come in, forced the government to cede to some of the arrangements that they have with communities, and Karura Forest is now being managed as a unique model. What I can't talk about is what limits Kenya Forest Service to spread that to other forest areas.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. On that note, let's take a break, Professor, and of course Elizabeth together with Jabez. But of course, when we come back, you'd also answer Nelson's questions. Very, very pertinent questions that you're raising this morning. But of course, if you have more questions, feel free to call in or actually, use our social media platforms. That is at NTV Kenya at Lubembe_Winnie. And let's just get to understand the importance of forests and what we can do collectively to actually protect our forest. So we'll see you after the short break. Keep the questions coming. We'll see you right after.
As Dr. Funiken Mamakai hosts unscripted true life relationship experiences on reality TV show Kupatana. Nia, Monday to Friday at 8 p.m. and Kupatana every Tuesday and Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Terms and conditions apply.
Burgers for $6. Did you say 6? Fungua app. Ding dong, double. Your favorite moment.
Now your favorite ice cream. Ding dong, double. It's so good.
Order what you want to select what you want.
Ding dong, double. Order it now. Download the app, order a Glovo, and we get it.
Ding dong, double.
At the first sign of pain, you need a solution that you can trust. Try Panadol Advance. With Panadol's Optizode formula, the tablet absorbs quickly and starts providing fast and effective pain relief you can trust. Try Panadol Advance.
I'm growing up, I'm growing into every moment.
Thanks, Mom.
Nurture the moment with Minute Maid Delight. Now available in tropical, orange, mango, and apple flavor.
An infant starts to work on fever in just 15 minutes. Trust Panadol Baby and Infant to work on fever fast to bring back their cute smiles.
This place is huge. We'll never find them.
We will find them. I know they're here. Don't answer.
It's Cardenas.
Don't answer it. Frank said I was to come alone. If he sees you, we'll have a big problem.
We'll have a bigger problem if we don't find them.
I should have come alone. Don't answer it. Talking to you disgusts me. Why don't we just end this? Let Kata go. You can kill me if you want to, but we end this right here.
Shh, shut up.
Get peace of mind and protect the ones you love with the power of Dettol Bar Soap. It cleans and protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs. So no matter what type of mum you are, trust Dettol.
Maziwa kamili asili ya Kenya.
Right, thank you very much for staying with us. This is Your World, and just in case you're tuning in right now, today our focus is on the International Day of Forests under the theme Forest for Sustainable Production and Consumption. And of course, like we said, this is a very necessary conversation for all of us to have, just to make sure that we are on the same page as far as then protecting our forest and reaping the benefits from the same. So very quickly, Elizabeth and Jabez, of course, there was that question raised by Nelson. Has like 40,000 indigenous tree seedlings, don't know where to sell them, people are not buying, but then again there's some people who are buying, like in cartels, so they're not reaping the benefits from the same. So Jabez, which one do you want to take?
All right. Winnie, let me start by just setting this to context.
Okay.
It's really demoralizing to know that our communities are not able to sell their seedlings, yet if you look at the target that the government had when the president gave the directive that we would like to achieve the 10% tree cover by 2022. Actually, that was the target of the president that is supposed to be achieved by 2022.
At that point, we were at 6.9. Yes.
And they were talking about, planting up to 1.8 billion seedlings. That is really huge. Yeah. And they went ahead and actually developed a strategy of how to achieve this. And so you look at the targets that they were having in terms of seedlings, and Kenyans are crying that they're not able to sell, then there must be a problem. Yeah. So back to what Nelson raised in terms of we are producing these seedlings, but we are not able to sell. It still boils back to what we were saying earlier. Number one, having the right tree species for that particular area. But I want to now take away this blame from the communities and take it to various institutions. And here I'm talking about Kenya Forest Service and the county government. I feel they have an important role to play in terms of linking the community groups or the tree nursery operators to potential buyers, because most of the people who would like to buy tree seedlings, and especially in large amounts, they normally go through the county governments. They go through Kenya Forest Service. So can we be able to link these community groups to potential buyers? Number two, on the issue of cartels. Well, if this is something that happens on the ground, it's a reality. And I think my thoughts on it will be, number one, it is high time we develop standard pricing for various tree species nationally, so that I know if I'm going to buy, let's say, Juniperus proceras, the red cedar, then I know this is how much it costs, regardless of where I'm buying it. So there should be standard rates for various tree species, because the community groups are disparate. And so they will take any offer. And that's the opportunity that the brokers have seen. But as long as we are able to regularize that and make sure that we have standard pricing, then it will be able to do away with that. I think to me that is one way of addressing the issue of cartels.
Elizabeth, anything else that of course we need to, because corruption is like a very big issue in the country, and it's like it's in every single sector, right? And people are crying. It's like we're doing the right thing, we as a people, but then again, we're not seeing the benefits, or it's not going through the right channels.
I wouldn't attempt to address the question of corruption here. At this point, we might be here till December 2025. But I think from my perspective, in terms of solving the immediate issue of this gentleman called Nelson of having 40,000, indigenous tree seedlings. I think there's a certain failure of the institutions responsible, both at county and at national level, to address this specific issue. And I think one of the things that we might be able to solve and sort of kill two birds with one stone is if we were able to create, or KFS for that matter, was able to create some sort of database where we were aware what the demand for certain tree species is, and who is producing those particular, who's growing those particular tree seedlings. And in that way, then this Nelson, I think he said he's from
he is from,
is it Kapsabet?
Yes.
Yeah, he said he's from Kapsabet. Last year, when we were doing some reforestation work with the Nairobi National Park, we really went to extensive lengths to find indigenous tree species that would grow within the ecosystem of Nairobi National Park. And I think that's the issue that such a database would probably solve, in figuring out what do we need and who has the capacity to grow that particular species. And then go on to what Jabez is talking about in respect of linking the buyer and the seller.
Exactly. And of course, I also want to understand you as the East African Wildlife Society, all right? Then how do you come in terms of making sure that then again, we are all on the same page, right? The community is informed, there's a level of awareness that has been passed, the right institutions actually doing what they're supposed to do, the national government and the county government as well doing what they need to do to make sure that, again, like we said, protect our forests and make sure that we have enough forest cover. But also, Professor, there's also a question of development. And of course, as a country, we want to see developments, happening. But in the interest of development, we also see there's a way that the forests, of course, suffer in one way or the other. And also there's that question of corruption, which Elizabeth said, if we start talking about it right now, I will be here until, so many years to come. So then how do we balance the two in terms of, yes, making sure we see development in the country, but also making sure that we protect some of our natural resources?
Yeah, thank you, Winnie. Let me just fill up on what Elizabeth was talking about. there is for tree seedlings control, quality control. The Kenya Forest Research Institute has been in charge of looking at seeds requirements throughout the country. They have done a good job in trying to advise people which species to plant where, and they link up with the Kenya Forest Service very well on this. What has not happened is that we could not control the seedling producers, and for this there was a need for KFWG regulations, and they have just gone through this. So they are making some move through KFWG. It will be under Agriculture Act, but it will be tree seed distribution. That is the instrument that will help us to now certify the various nursery producers, and also to help us to fix the seedling prices across.
Okay.
It is a very important development, but it's a little bit off the Forest Service. Is under Agriculture Act, and progress is being made. Now, when you talk about development and conservation, the conflicts that we have, forests are protected under the Act. They are gazetted forests. Within gazetted forests, we have nature reserves. Those are protected.
Protected, yeah.
What happens though is that there are pressures that come from outside to hive a little bit of this forest for this development. Some of the development might be good. Now, we have improved the forest laws over time to make sure that when there is a request for hiving off a forest for development, some due process is on board that can explain us the benefits of that forest being taken out versus the destruction, the impact of destruction. Environmental impact assessment must be, and Kenya Forest Service should do that for any request. Unfortunately, that has not been the case in all these development issues. When they hear the government strong arm, they keep quiet. So there is where the development becomes a problem.
Okay. Do you feel that then again there needs to be pressure from, again, external sources, institutions, for example, like the East African Wildlife Society, just to make sure that then the due process is followed, we protect our natural resources, but also we embrace, forms of development. And also something else that, again, we need to somewhat address, and that is, again, of course, there's that aspect of then human-wildlife conflict. We also have like forest fires. And it's just a lot that then again, of course, makes then this efforts to conserve our natural resources a bit of a problem, right? So then what roles do we have then individually to make sure that we reduce, for example, cases of forest fires, the human-wildlife conflict, and all those things to protect them? And then, of course, we'll also talk about the milestones, because we've made a bit of progress, but of course, more needs to be done. Elizabeth, do you want to take that?
Sure. I think there's something quite important that Jabez said at the beginning of the conversation, that we cannot talk about rights without talking about responsibility. That yes, we have the right to a clean and healthy environment, but we have the responsibility of ensuring that our environment is actually clean and healthy. And when we talk about hazards or challenges to forest conservation, it is our responsibility collectively and individually to look out for these things. For instance, smoking and cigarette butts all over the place in forests, that could be a fire hazard. But what we've actually come to find out, or rather to hear, let me say to hear, allegedly, just so that you don't get sued today, is that a lot of these fires that we are consistently seeing are actually cases of arson, cartels who are no longer happy with the way that government is trying to pull up its socks in management of our resources, not happy with the sort of citizen engagement and community organization that we are seeing in support of forest conservation and natural resource conservation.
Okay.
From an East African wildlife perspective, one of our current, let me call it a war, one of the current wars that we're currently facing and fighting is this proposal by the House Procedures Committee to change the way that forest boundaries are changed in this country. So currently, what the Forest Act of 2016 provides is that Parliament has the role of changing the boundary to a forest, you know. But any petition for change of such a boundary has to be recommended by the Kenya Forest Service. So the act starts by giving any citizen of the country a right to petition Parliament to change the boundary of a forest, giving certain conditions that have to be met.
All right.
Then the act goes on to say any such petition has to pass through the Kenya Forest Service, and the Kenya Forest Service has to make sure that this petition, you know, agrees with certain criteria as well that's set out in the act. Now we are seeing an effort by Parliament to kick KFS to the curb and to say that any petitions for boundary changes for a national forest will be considered by the clerk of the National Assembly, you know, or the chair of the committee of the environment and whatever committee of the House. Now that's a really dangerous way to go.
Yes.
It's a dangerous way to go because the people we elect to Parliament are not forest managers. You know, they are not trained in natural resource and forest management for them to be able to make such a decision. And we already have an existing institution that is actually doing a good job. Obviously there are gaps and challenges, and there's quite a lot of room for improvement. But that role should be left with Kenya Forest Service. So you do see that we're fighting this war from all corners, and if such an amendment were to be let to pass through, we would go back to pre-2005 Act, where you would wake up and 65,000 acres of a forest have gone in a single day.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
and you know, statistics have shown that we've previously had a consistent loss of about 5,000 hectares of forest per day, per single day. And that's a lot, you know. So we really need to rethink how we are approaching some of these issues and to put pressure on our parliamentarians. This parliament's life is about to end, and we appeal to the president. He's the last line of defense in this thing. He is literally the last line of defense if the amendment goes through as currently drafted. We hope that we are able to shelf such an amendment until we're able to properly have a conversation nationally about why such an amendment is necessary and exactly why it should not pass.
All right.
Okay. If I can weigh into
very
that.
quickly.
Like you saw, I represent Kenya Forest Working Group, which is a platform that brings various stakeholders to discuss such matters. We have looked at this proposal to change the Forest Conservation Amendment Act, and we have a few concerns. Number one, we are asking ourselves, why is it urgent to change the law? Number two, looking at the history, we have lost most of our forests, during electioneering period because people will want to allocate land for political gain. So this amendment is coming at a time when we are headed to election. And we are also looking at what they propose to change. It is not very significant to start with. It is not very significant to have a complete amendment of the act. We've seen cases where when we have just small changes that you want to make in law, they have done through statutes, law, miscellaneous amendments. It doesn't have to really us looking at the entire law. And the Ministry of Environment and Forestry is already working to have a new forest policy. And we know once that process is completed, then we are going to review the entire act. We had a report by the task force that was formed in 2018 to look at the issues of forest management and logging. And they already proposed a number of changes that needs to go into the law. So our plea is, why can't the Procedure and House Rules Committee withdraw this bill so that it waits at that time when now we have to do the entire review of this act. Yeah, so it's really, we feel it's not, they have not demonstrated, it's not too urgent. It can wait,
All right. And of course, I can see our time is far much spent. So can we just quickly track some of the progress, the milestones that we've hit as a country, and what more needs to be done, Professor, just to make sure that then again we achieve some targets that we have set for ourselves? Yeah,
let me just start by saying that this proposed bill is an affront on conservation. To give the history, Winnie, before 2005, we had a Forest Act which provided for the minister responsible for forests to give a gazette notice 28 days before forest boundaries was altered. That is what was abused so much that we campaigned up to 2005 to have that one changed, because the minister was always under pressure of parliamentarians, the political class, to change forests. And we lost so much forest land to basically the political class, largely. The political class would then use the poor farmers. They would say, we want land for the Ogiek. But they were just using the Ogiek to get some land. They would take it and Ogiek would be left out. This has happened in Mount Kenya, Mount Kenya, Forest and so on. So we closed that in 2005 Forest Act. But it was not sufficient to just say that the minister must take it to parliament, which is what is in 2005 Act. We moved ahead and changed again in 2016. We changed the section 34 2A to read that the agency, the government agency that is supposed to do this, must do due diligence, including environmental impact assessment, so that any allocation is seen to be realistic. This is what the MPs now want to destroy. They want to take us back to before the 2005. Now, I have said that the forest excisions of the past were politically motivated.
Instigated,
ostensibly for people, but they ended up in politicians' favor. It is amazing that the same politicians now want to take control. You know, people look at forest land as a bull to be slaughtered. Now, if you have guests, Winnie, and you want to slaughter an animal, would you take the known thieves and grabbers to slaughter that animal? You wouldn't. So Parliament is the wrong people to come and make any proposal. Now, there is also good practice. We have been saying that the Forest Service has not been doing things correctly. You move with the policy and then move to a law that implements this policy. In 2005, they muddled up this thing. They passed a law without a policy and started thinking about policy later on. Same in 2016. Now, for MPs to say they want to change, they have a bill before a policy, I don't understand. We must stick to good practice. If there is a need to change the thinking, because policy is what we look at first, and then we change the law. So I think MPs are going to protect, and this to me is related to the recent threat by the CS environment that certain plots will be reclaimed.
We have two callers on the line, and we literally have less than 10 minutes before we end the show. So let's take this two calls. And we have Kennedy from Eldoret. Good morning.
Morning to you.
Thank you very much for calling us. Do you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I have a comment, same two questions also, because I am so interested with today's program. I have been volunteering planting trees on schools because I'm a Kenya Power contractor. So, we normally destroy trees when we are constructing power lines. But due to last mile connectivity, the company agreed with us that we are supposed to plant indigenous trees on a public places. But now, when we came back to Kenya Forest Service, according to my knowledge, the way I know, some years back, we were having a rural forester. But now, we are not seeing that rural forester to guide people how to harvest the trees, how to plant trees, and to show them even the water catchment areas whereby they are supposed to plant indigenous trees. Another thing, we are supposed to tell the government the truth about charcoal burning, even destroying of our water resource management or water catchment resources on matter of charcoal burning. If the government is going to put more effort on reducing the cost of electricity so that we can go to green energy, we can use electricity when we are cooking. Another thing is on gas. So when we get those things to be very cheap, we are not able to use firewood on method of cooking, and there is nobody who is going to look for firewood so that we can use them on cooking. So, and also, if they can give us a subsidy on biogas, because we have animals near from Mazingishu and some parts of our farms, we are surrounding with the forest, like gravelia trees, not indigenous, but gravelia trees. We have eucalyptus. And also, we have already harvested those trees that were planted some many years ago. And now, we are running out of rain. In fact, now we were supposed to start planting, but now rain is not there because trees are not there. So we urge the forest to give us a guideline, rural foresters, so that can give us direction. How are we going to plant trees?
All right.
They give us trees like Zamia before. They were giving out trees on schools so that they can distribute to parents, so that every parent can plant 2 trees, 4 trees, even 5 trees.
All right. Thank you very much, Kennedy.
A good environment, yeah.
All right. I hear you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kennedy. And we also have Walter from Kakamega. Good morning.
Morning to you, madam.
Thank you very much for calling us. Very quickly, do you have a question or a comment?
Yes, my concern has been that in fact, I'm calling from the foot of Misango Hills, which is a gazetted area. Misango Hills was gazetted in 2003, and we have had very minimal activities, especially from the Kenya Forest Services. Even the community went ahead and provided houses for the Kenya Forest Services, but so far up to date, there is no single officer who has been able to come so that they can assist in protecting this forest. One, I've heard the professor say that he has served on the Presidential Commission, Permanent Commission for Forestry. What my question has been that why is it that we continue to do the same things and expect different results? Because this issue of 10% forest cover has been sung all over. I can tell you, even for now, as we celebrate this World Day, the locals here are not even aware that this day exists. There is no initiative for public awareness. How can we have this? And then finally, I want also I want to know why we have so very good budgets when it comes to forest matters. But at the end of it, we don't see anything trickling to the ground to assist the communities understand the concept. Because this is a concept that the professors talked about uniqueness. Every area is unique. So we need to calm down and educate our people and empower them so that they can understand this new concept.
All right. Thank you very much, Walter, of course, for those concerns and a question. And we literally have 4 minutes to go. So I think you will answer very quickly and of course, I'll take that as your parting shot. So can we begin with you, Jarvis, very quickly?
Okay. Let me pick on that issue of how to make sure that the information trickles down to
the people, and even the funds as well, the budgets. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is really a big challenge. We seem to be knowing a lot at the national level, but it doesn't really trickle down to the local communities. And that comes back to what we were saying about the issues of awareness creation. And this is not just a government institution's role, but also the role that various civil society organizations can also be able to play. If you look at the Forest Act, there's actually look at Section 55. We created a tree planting week. Do the locals even know about that? So I think, to me, there's really a lot that still needs to be done. Yeah.
Okay. And then, Elizabeth, do you want to chime in either on Kennedy's concerns or Walter? Any of the two?
I think for me, I'll leave the scientific stuff to Prof.
Yes.
In terms of biogas and trees and so on and so forth. What I would like to say is that we are fortunate that International Day of Forest is falling just a few months before we get to elections. And my challenge to everyone watching this show and citizens of the country is that elections is not only about roads and schools and development. Ask yourself whether you're a member of parliament or the person who's coming to the ground to dance on a whatever it is, ask for votes, is concerned about the natural resources in your county or in your constituency and the concerns that you actually do have. And those concerns, insisting that those concerns actually make it as debates to the floor of the House, when budgets are being read, that there is proper allocation when you're talking to your MCAs, figuring out, like Jabez was talking about earlier, what budget do we have to find forest extension officers, how do we get them to the communities, and so on and so forth.
Okay, yeah. All right. And Professor, moving to green energy and making sure that, again, people have alternatives so that we do not go back to the forest.
Yes. Now, biogas is one alternative energy that was pushed in the 80s, and it has not sold fast in many communities because of the social structure of communities. To manage biogas is messy for some communities. But it is something that can be promoted, and the Ministry of Energy was actually promoting this specifically in certain areas. I go to Walter's comments on the extension, forest extension. You know, after devolution, the Forest Service, the forest extension was supposed to go to counties. But then I realized that they put some cogs in that transition, that the county government must sign with the national government on some transition problem, and most of it is stuck there. So what has happened is we have a lot of trained people in the counties who are ignored by the county government. They are actually idle. You can engage them if you get them, but they are not answering to anybody because of this transition agreement, which has not been. This is how we handle ourselves, our affairs sometimes.
Okay, Prof.
Yes,
like 10 seconds.
I agree that the budgets that are allocated to forests are far short of the 10% that we talk about. And this is to Kenya Forest Service, to county governments, and through the donors to communities. So we are not going to achieve that 10%. That one is
if
clear.
nothing is done. All right. Thank you very much, Professor Elizabeth Gitari, environmental lawyer, law advocate, and chairperson, East African Wildlife Society. Of course, Professor Frederick Owino, forestry professional and patron, Kenya Forest Society, and of course, Jabez Okumu, programs and advocacy manager and representative of the Kenya Forest Working Group Secretariat. Thank you very much, all of you, for coming by today. And of course, just to help us have this very pertinent conversation on the International Day of Forest. Clearly, there's a problem, but a lot more needs to be done. Of course, we've made progress, but we need to make progress. And on that note, we conclude the show. My name is Winnie Lubembe. God bless. See you tomorrow for another interesting topic on governance. All right, you do not want to miss that. But until tomorrow, stay safe and God bless. Goodbye.